Welcome you all to the Day with FM leadership series. It's an initiative to bring in leadership perspective, knowledge sharing and learning from the leaders, and also education series. And from the last 2 decades, we've seen the evolution of the workplace, like what we used to build about 2 decades back or a decade back, and today it's completely different. So, bringing in innovation and solutions in workplace management to increase efficiency, increasing effectiveness is going to be a key for the success of an organization. And today we have Andrew, who is going to speak about his thoughts on workplace evolution. And also I have my co-host Lisa. Thank you, Andrew, for accepting and being part of this leadership series. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Andrew, we're really thrilled to have you here. Thanks so much for being a part of the series. I've participated in 2 segments of your Workplace Evolutionaries Workplace Management series that you co-lead. Those were of really great value to me because they focus on change management and communication skills for the facility manager. I loved the geographically diverse makeup of the participants and the hands-on modeling workshops. So those were really, really great. The workplace has always been subject to change, but right now companies across the globe are redefining the workplace in an accelerated timeline, and it's placing high demands on facility management and making this a particularly timely discussion. For a facility manager faced with an existing real estate portfolio and pressures from leadership to right size or modify space usage, where do you think is the best place to start?
Well, I mean, right now there's a lot of confusion around, I think. There's different people have got different opinions about the whole transition to hybrid, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea or whatever. I think the place to start is with the data, to be perfectly honest with you. And, all too often, I think these discussions at the top end of organizations are dominated by opinions. And I think we're in a place here where we need to get beyond the opinions. And of course, if you're as we do quite often, step into a senior leadership team and have a discussion about some of these things, everybody around the table has got a different view. And getting some sort of concrete base of data to at least begin to frame the conversation in a rational way, I think is a good place. And of course, that data comes from lots of different places, from your, actually who's attending the office, surveys, all sorts of things that have been generated through the pandemic. But, that's where I would start, Lisa.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up? You mentioned surveys. Surveys are subjective because everybody believes that their space is perhaps at risk. So when you do surveys, do you have a technique, if you're not basing it on occupancy data and you're asking people to tell you, do you have a suggestion for how to make that data more real?
Well, I think you've got to make the questions, so you mustn't lead the witness on the questions. And I think you need to create tools and questions that enable people to articulate the reality of their world. A lot of the time, certainly don't ask, people what they like is for sure a good start point, but try to get under the bonnet of what their needs are and what their roles are and what their aspirations are. But I think, surveys are, of course, a little bit subjective, but, people's opinions and subjective views of the world are an important piece of data, actually. And I think one of the things we found, actually, as the pandemic has begun to subside, is that the expressions that people made during the pandemic about how many days they would want to come into the office have actually, what the reality is that people have come in less than the data that we've been getting. So there is an interesting challenge within all this, because I think over the period of the pandemic, people have got used to the idea of working from home, many of whom it's financially beneficial. It's, given them a new way of living and stuff. And the problem is, I think that in the world that we're heading towards, we need some attendance and we need some working away. Attendance in offices clearly has value. But at the moment, I think we've gone almost too far the other way we've got a situation where people are almost not coming in at all, and some notion of face-to-face connection, I think, is really quite important. So the data, but again, data is really important to frame these conversations, particularly at C-suite level, in my opinion.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I think you covered well. One of the challenge we always face, and even earlier, is we cannot build all the skill set in-house. So it's very challenging for us to build all the skill set. Considering this workplace changes and dynamics, not all the facility managers have a training or a background to lead the major workplace transition, or, or maybe on their own or with the in-house expertise. What resources should an FM seek out that would help them to succeed with these kind of projects?
Well, I mean, I think, obviously one of the resources is the Workplace Strategy and Leadership Program that's available for IFMA members to join. And as Lisa was saying earlier on, one of the strong parts of that is the change management element of it. And change management is talked about a lot, but there is a science to it. And I think it's important that facility managers at least have some ideas about the framework in which this is done, because the reality is technical changes can often be relatively straightforward, very complex often, but still relatively straightforward. When we're trying to get many thousands of people to adopt a model of behavior that we believe to be an appropriate one, that actually takes quite a lot of time and energy. And it's not just about communication, it's really about engagement and enabling people to really understand the change in their own world and through their own lens before they can begin to make a judgment about whether that change is good, bad, or indifferent, and then to move. So I think that's kind of important. I mean, clearly in most organizations there are change professionals, possibly within the human resources function, maybe accessing some of those guys, or organizations like ourselves. I mean, it's change management is the thing we do every day of our lives. So we have a community of people who are very expert at it, and you can use change management experts to really get very close to you and make those changes happen, or you can use them as a coach, which is sometimes a good way to do it. So you transfer the skills at the same time.
I like the reminder not to try and do it by themselves, to bring in those change managers. You've sort of hinted at it, but I'll ask the question directly. What would you say is the single most important element that a facility manager must incorporate in planning workplace change today?
Well, I think the most important thing for me, I think, in change management is to make a distinction between what is described as communication and what we would see as being engagement. Anytime somebody sends out a directive or an email or something, then, if it's going to several thousand people, then that email or directive is going to be read in very different ways by those different people. And of course, emails and communications of a broadcast nature, they don't talk. You can't have a conversation with an email, for instance. So I think for me, one of the most important things in change management is actually getting a proper engagement between the representatives of the organization, and sometimes we use champions, very carefully selected from within the organization, who then can become the conduit for dialogue. And I think increasingly in change programs, dialogue is really important, because people need to be able to reveal their misunderstandings about a program and feel comfortable to share that misunderstanding, and eventually come to a point where they understand the truth about the change. It's only really when each one of us is able to determine what that truth is, and that truth is going to be quite different depending upon the nature of the individual, gender, age, lifestyle, domestic circumstances. These are all playing a part in this this new workplace world that we're in. And so it's quite important that there is a dialogue going on between somebody who really understands the nature of the change and the person that we're inviting to get involved in the change. And that has to happen, you know, I think down at grassroots level, people have to be engaged in those conversations. I think where we are at the moment, I think, unfortunately, too many organizations have issued edicts about how many days a week they're going to have people in their offices, really without thinking too much about the nature of work that people are involved in. And, you know, I think people have begun to be a little bit uncomfortable about that because, you know, let's face it, they've been working very successfully for 2 years and operating very well from home. And then somebody suddenly says, now you've got to come into the office. And the question is, why do you want me to come in if I am, you know, able to work very well away? And there needs to be a good response to that. So, you know, it's important to establish what is the nature of the change that you want to create. Why do you want that change to happen as a leadership team? And then think about why the individual should be prepared to change. What is it what's in it for that individual? And then how is it going to happen? Who's involved and when? And often change programs launch without anybody thinking too much about the detail of those questions, nor thinking about how they engage with their population, as opposed to simply sending some broadcast messages or running a sort of an online town hall. And I think, you know, it's a much more sophisticated process that's needed in order to get large populations on side and understanding and committed to a change which then can be sustained. And you know, so that would be my response, I think, Lisa, on that one.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the biggest challenges is people resist change. So how do we involve all the stakeholders? How do we educate them? And I think even when we moved into an agile workspace, when we moved out from a closed room into an open space, I think there's a lot of resistance to move out from there. I think it's all about agility and adaptability, and I think thought leadership is very, very important. And considering the current trends with the workplace like hybrid workplace, inclusivity, diversity, there's a huge focus on taking care of transition of a knowledge worker occupants of our facilities. Many of them are given a new flexibility in now when where they perform to work. What advice programs or initiatives you've seen that would help to make frontline workers, those must be on site to perform their work, including FM staff, right? And other staff who feel equally included and valued and cared for. So this is the biggest challenge all of us will face. So what is your piece of advice towards that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm going to sort of go back to what I just said before. I mean, every individual in the organization is unique. And, you know, sometimes we somehow imagine that everybody's the same, but they're not. So we have to start to think about the individual as a unique personality, unique brain, unique circumstances, and we need to address the issues that those individuals are going to be interested in. And that, I think, is using people like champions and making sure that leaders are themselves comfortable to have conversations about some of these topics, I think is a really important part. And of course, from a facilities management standpoint, you know, you're in touch with people all the time. You know, facilities management is a really important job because, you know, for the lion's share of the time that people are in employment, you're looking after their world, really. So it's important that that world recognizes the fact that they're all very different. And even things like temperature, you know, people have very different sensitivities to temperature, and yet we don't seem to recognize that often within air conditioning systems and so on. So I think, you know, we have to start to think about the individual as a unique person. We have to think about what it is that we're going to do to help that individual to be as effective as possible and to be very supportive, which changes, you know, thinking about this not from a kind of factory standpoint, not from a process standpoint, but actually getting closer to the individuals you've got in your organization and actually trying to find out the things that you need to do to put in place to make them safe. I mean, and that's true whether they're in the office or outside, to make sure that their well-being is being monitored, and that there are programs in place to help people to manage their own well-being, and leaders in particular. And these, I think, in the new world, these are things that we can start to bring in, I think, as part of what I call the next generation of facilities management. Some of the ideas that we've been working with within the workplace strategy and leadership program, for me, are setting the trend for how the industry and the profession needs to evolve and develop. I think,
And can I have one follow on? Do you have any tips specific though to those who are in the FM industry and don't have that flexibility? They have to come to work to do their jobs. So those frontline workers, have you seen any trends that are giving them any kinds of flexibility or any help in the fact that they don't have the same kind of flexibility as the knowledge workers, the people they serve?
Lisa, I'm actually struggling to understand what you're saying. I'm afraid that the line doesn't seem to be quite as good as we might want it to be.
Okay. Let me try once more and see if we can get it through. Do you have any tips for specific to frontline workers, those people who don't have that flexibility and aren't being given the option to come home? So our facility managers are taking care of all the people in the office. Do you have any tips for how we can best take care of them, our facilities staff?
Okay. Yeah, no, I think there are some tips actually for looking after the people in facilities who, ultimately on a daily basis look after the population. And I think, again, if we have to think about these people are doing a really important job, and if they feel good about what they're doing, and if they feel rewarded and they feel, cared for, then it seems to me that will rub off onto the people that they are looking after in the buildings. So we know from our work that social cohesion and trust, in particular, and perceived supervisory support, are all things that need that will help people to get into a position where they feel rewarded, they feel comfortable, and they feel sort of comfortable in their own boots, if you like. They're in a psychologically safe environment. And so I think it's an important job managing a community of people, often who come from different backgrounds, and making sure that those people are feeling supported, they've got the information they need to do their jobs, they're not caught on the back foot, and they all feel connected as part of one group who are trying to work together to make all this happen. And that includes not only employees of the organization, but also contractors and subcontractors, partners, because in the end, it's everybody is playing a role here to try to bring a great experience to the people in the office. And so if they're not feeling connected and they're not feeling all part of the same team, then we can expect that to kind of rub off somewhere along the line, Lisa. So that would be what I'd say to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I think you well covered. I think one of the biggest challenges as we keep facing this, and workplace changes are going to be dynamic. And before this pandemic, we used to focus on indoor environmental quality, thermal comfort, visual comfort, and acoustic. And today, we're not just managing people at workplace, we're also managing people at virtual workplace, right? So typically, how do we attract more talent? How do we retain talent? How can we increase the productivity? Though it is an hybrid environment today, I think how do we move everything into a workplace environment is going to be challenging. And we need to keep striving and looking at innovative solutions to get people back is one. Second thing is, which can also enable more collaborative discussions at workplace. I think more of my place to we place is where we have more of we place created for discussions, collaborative discussions. And these challenges are going to remain, and we need to have, as one size doesn't fit all, as Andrew said. I think we need to adopt, looking at nature of the organization, size of the organization, and the culture of an organization plays a very critical role in defining the workplace strategy. I think a couple of multiple parameters we need to consider: the region, geographic location, to enable strategies. And I'd like to thank Andrew for his time. I'm sure we're going to have some more leadership series with him because he comes with a vast knowledge and experience. Maybe we'll also cover one case study in the next leadership series. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Andrew, once again.
Thank you
It's
both.
a pleasure. Thank you.